Great, thanks, Scott. Super exciting topic. Although it's interesting, I feel like we kind of talk about AI maybe a little bit more than we do it, and the conversations tend to be very diffuse and sort of orthogonal. I think, the AI conversations sort of go all over the place. Like, isn't this cool? I tried this. It looks cool. What I'm trying to do today is something a little bit different, which is to put AI in context, to put AI in the context of your marketing objectives and specifically your MarTech stack. So, of course, with Real Story Group, it always starts with the underlying technology vendors. So we do cover more than a dozen different AI vendors. You can see them in the lime green line on our famous subway map. By the way, this is the latest subway map. We're going to have a webinar about this and coming up in a couple of weeks. So this is some of the first people to see the 2025 Real Story Group vendor map. And you can see the AI line has gotten longer than last year, which means that there's more kind of vendors coming into the mix that are significant, have some significant play in the enterprise MarTech space. So this is one way of looking at it. And as usual, you see the major players in the city center, but also a number of significant independent AI vendors as well. But that's the marketplace. I'll come back to that in a minute. What we really want to start with is how to think about AI in general. And when we try to frame what's the best way of thinking about something that makes it susceptible to making good decisions, we think about a reference model. A reference model helps you see the world, predict the world, understand the world, communicate the world, and then communicate where you want to go. So we'll talk a little bit about our regular MarTech stack reference model, but then we'll get into the AI reference model, which is really where does AI fit in the MarTech stack. I'll show you an application of it. Then, of course, we'll talk some about the marketplace and wrap up with some recommendations. As Scott mentioned, we'll have time at the end for you to ask whatever questions you have, anything you disagree with, any comments, so on and so forth. And then we'll be able to get to those. So just use the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. All right. Some of you may have seen this. This is our MarTech reference architecture that we have been using and revising over the past several years. This is for B2C firms. I'll talk about that in a second. Where you have engagement channels at the top, there's at least a dozen of those. There's more growing all the time. Then various interaction and delivery environments, a lot of different ways that your content and services may get to your customers and partners. But then the first colored row are specific engagement services. And that's what we've all been working on really for the past 15 years or so, kind of beefing up our capabilities. But our argument here is that as the 2020s proceed, the real differentiator here is going to be around enterprise foundation services. So these are services that are really the foundation of your overall stack, and they're decoupled from a specific engagement service, so they can be applied across all of your stack in a more coherent omni-channel way. There's really three legs to this stool, which is content and information, data, and decisioning. And these are capabilities that you need that aren't specifically bound to a particular channel. So these are the legs of what we call a kind of a three-legged architecture. So this is the B2C version. B2B actually isn't that much different. Structurally, it's fundamentally the same. There's just some different engagement services, some different foundation services, but you still have the three legs of the stool: content and information, data, and decisioning. So here's a model in action. This is a consumer products good firm, their as-is stack. This was a firm that we helped kind of rethink their overall stack, and this was our what we found as their kind of as-is environment. So this is one way to use this sort of model, which is to put logos into boxes. There's also a 2B version of this that I can't share with you, but sort of suggested, hey, this is where you should be going. But anyway, you get the idea. This is one way to use a reference model. There's other ways as well, and we'll get to that in a second. But the point is just to sort of introduce it conceptually. And you can see AI here is at all three legs of the stool. So it has a role to play in content and information, data, and decisioning with respect to generative AI, insights AI, and decisioning AI. So that's what we're going to drill down a little bit more deeply when we talk about AI in the MarTech stack. We'll do an overview of the overall model, and then we'll show an example of the model at work. So this is our reference model overview. I'm going to linger here. We did a similar presentation like this just for our subscribers. We go into great detail about all these boxes. I'm going to kind of give you a high-level overview, and then we'll kind of take some action together on it. So the overall reference model, you have, again, diverse engagement services at the top. So those we carry over from the previous model. But we drill down a lot more significantly here on the various pieces underneath that. So first, and maybe most importantly, or the first one we really want to line up is on the far right, where you see the blue colored boxes around responsible AI. So these are a series of considerations and capabilities that you really want to make sure before you get serious about AI that your firm has put up these guardrails, ideally reflected as norms and policies and procedures around how you're going to address some of the specific risks and opportunities around AI. So hopefully none of this is new to you, but it's really critical, particularly if you want to take an experiment and kind of put it into production, really scale it. You've got to make sure that you've got your AI guardrails in place, and those are 6 key considerations. Then what we're going to do is continue kind of clockwise and look at the bottom here, foundational capabilities. So this is really important, again, as MarTech leaders to think about that outside of the MarTech domain, there are some key enterprise capabilities that you're going to want to tie into and leverage around things like customer data operations, AI and ML ops, certainly enterprise content that you're going to need for custom LLMs, so on and so forth. These are all foundational capabilities that you're going to want to partner with across your enterprise to, again, this is all about taking a potential pilot or an experiment and making it scale. You need those foundational capabilities. Likewise, foundational platforms. So we're bringing this back. These are, again, getting back to the 3 legs of the stool. We're inheriting this from our previous reference model. These are foundational platforms that when we talk to some of our clients and subscribers, they find themselves as they try to scale their AI initiatives really needing these sorts of platforms and honestly really kind of missing them when they don't have them, which is authoritative customer data stores, right? If you don't have good customer data, it could be difficult to leverage, particularly insights and decisioning AI. Personalization and orchestration engines so that you can actually have those insights and decisions then take flight. And then the other big one that's still an emerging kind of consideration, but we've seen some large enterprises really be successful here, is omni-channel content stores, which is being able to manage componentized content that's independent of channel, really critical for then driving a lot of your generative AI initiatives. But then we get to the fun part, and that's this middle layer, which is really a series of use cases starting with agentic AI, where you've got workflow automation, which are things that happen within a platform, and then stack orchestration, which are agents that work across different platforms. And there's a series of really important core services that you need that kind of make agent AI quite different and unique relative to the other ones. Then we look at Insights AI, and we believe that Insights AI is really kind of the engine underneath all of this, that it's really kind of figuring out what it is that are the opportunities or the problems that you could be overcoming. And we've got 5 different use cases there. I won't read them for you, but you can see that. Then Insights really drives decisioning AI, which is, okay, what is the next best thing, or what is someone's propensity? What do we need to be doing with these insights that we've gleaned? And then finally, generative AI, and we have a somewhat different take, a somewhat unconventional wisdom here on generative AI that says that this is really downstream from some of the other insights and decisions you're going to be making. But clearly a lot of opportunity around generative, particularly if you're looking to scale things like personalization, next best action, and so forth. So you can see the 16 different use cases here, and those use cases are really critical for you to be thinking about which ones do you want to prioritize. And this is also how we evaluate vendors and how we think about when we're working with an organization like yours, we're thinking about what does this AI roadmap, what does your AI roadmap look like? Where are the key opportunities lie? You know, thinking of them in terms of these use cases help bring some order to what is otherwise can be a very disordered sort of conversation. So 3 key takeaways from this model. First is, again, the primacy of use cases. So use cases are really essential, first of all, to making sure that these kind of cool experiments you're doing, where you're really significantly investing, is where you're aligned with business objectives, right? So it's business alignment. It's also central to evaluating solution fit, and I'll get into that in the next slide. The other argument we're making here is a layered approach. So this is where we're kind of being forward-looking based on what we've seen happen, you know, prior across enterprise stacks, which is to say, yeah, AI capabilities are showing up literally in every vendor that you use. Every vendor in your stack probably now at least claims to have some sort of an AI or ML subsystem and a set of capabilities that they've lit up. Now, if you're looking for stack coherence, if you're looking for customer experience coherence, if you're looking for the ability to scale in an omni-channel way, we think the future is really more of a layered approach, where these different use cases become a layer in your stack, a set of capabilities and services that you can inject into these engagement environments, after making sure, of course, that they fit your different guardrails. So we think the future is more looking at AI as kind of a layered approach. Then finally, a key takeaway was those bottom 2 rows that I started the conversation on, is that there's some key dependencies here that are really critical to your readiness. So sometimes we'll work with a client on their overall AI readiness. And this has to do with, to what extent are you prepared and capable to take a really interesting experiment or prototype or pilot that you've done and really scale it. A lot of that's going to depend on the quality and breadth of the foundational platforms that you have in place. So here's an example of putting the model to work. So at Real Story Group, we always evaluate vendors according to use cases. So not through sort of functional capabilities, do they have this, do they have that, but really to what extent can they help solve particular problems or address opportunities within use cases. And that's really how vendors differentiate here. So here's an example. We just took IBM Watson X and said, okay, here's the areas where they do reasonably well, maybe even above average. Here's some of the areas where they have done decent targeting, and then you can see there's a number of use cases that that Watson doesn't address at all. Now, this is actually kind of interesting because Watson is one of the broader tools in the marketplace. In other words, it at least tries to address an unusually large number of use cases. As you can see, it doesn't do all of them particularly well or deeply, but it's unusually broad. More likely with other vendors, you'd see a lot more of these empty circles. So again, at Real Story Group, we always say we're not looking for the best AI vendor or the best MarTech vendor. We're looking for the right fit for you. So those of you who are subscribers to our AI stream, you can click that link, log into your dashboard, and compare IBM and others head to head according to use case fit, any number of things, generate custom research, generate a custom quadrant, all that good stuff that you need to sort of figure out, okay, who are the technology partners that are going to be a good fit for us going forward. So that's the model and a couple of different ways to leverage it. Now let's look at the overall marketplace. So this is really interesting, how this is all kind of playing out. It's playing out a little bit differently than we might have thought a year ago. And so we just this month have updated our overall logo chart. Here it is. The AI for your MarTech stack. This is the marketplace circa Q2 of 2025. So on your left, a little bit off on its own, you've got foundation models from some major vendors that you've heard of. These are companies that have invested billions, or in other cases, tens of billions of dollars into these foundation models, which are very powerful, don't always have the kind of user interfaces that you might need to drop into a marketing environment. So these are platforms that you can either build highly custom marketing applications on top of them or plug them into a vendor that's amenable to having them work in the background. That's the ideal kind of legless model when we talk about that, which is an engagement vendor that can apply services from a more foundational vendor. So this is something for you as you look at bringing in new engagement technology, say a new DAM, a new WCM, a new CDP into your environment, to really make that an increasingly important consideration that you can plug in different foundation models into whatever AI subsystems they have. Then if you look at the market, we think that right now it's actually the simplest way to look at this is the orientation of the particular vendor according to those three legs of the stool: insights, decisioning, and generative. So that doesn't mean that a vendor that's more insights oriented doesn't have any decisioning, or a vendor like Salesforce that's focused on decisioning doesn't have any insights. What we're talking about here is like, what's your primary focus? What's the real drive? What's sort of the differentiator of this vendor? Doesn't mean that they're particularly good at it. They might not be. It doesn't mean that they're particularly broad, but this is where their emphasis is right now: insights oriented, decisioning oriented, or generative. Of course, the key thing on the generative side then too is you can kind of bifurcate the market between those that are more narrative oriented and those that are more graphic oriented, image generation. Of course, the vendors always complain about all these boxes because no vendor ever wants to be in a box. And so, but again here, it's more like their orientation and their direction. So that's the marketplace as a whole. So we already, here is the Microsoft logo here, Copilot. No, the Microsoft logo here is some more foundational sorts of capabilities, Kathy, that they have. And so, you know, we can go into more detail later about some of the specific capabilities that you have, you can light up within Azure. Copilot is more of a specific application that is most closely associated with Teams. So it's kind of a productivity helper. So thanks for that question. And now we will move on to a little bit of extra icing on the cake here. So we've got a bonus for you today, which is the AI agent marketplace. So it's interesting, you'll see some overlap here, but not necessarily a ton of overlap. We've got 5 categories here. Again, this may change a little bit over time, but this is we think the best way to look at the agent marketplace today. So there's a little bit of overlap with the other, but what's striking about this is that with respect to at least sort of freestanding agents, it's a very different marketplace from the AI marketplace. So that's interesting and suggests that there's a little bit of a bifurcation here. Now that doesn't mean that, you know, your MarTech vendor, we see a lot of them suddenly popping up and saying, oh, we've got an agent framework, we've got agents now in our platform. What they really mean is they probably have intra-platform capabilities that may or may not be true agents, may or may not be homegrown technology, may or may not use some of these other vendors underneath. And so, you know, you want to be careful as always about the provenance of those sorts of tools. But if we're looking at agents as agent technology, this is what it looks like today. You have some MarTech and CX vendors, Salesforce, ServiceNow, SAP. Could probably put Adobe there, although Adobe's a little bit immature here. In this box on the far left, closed ecosystem, which means that they have some agents that, again, can do some workflow automation, but probably not, at least not yet, really true cross-platform orchestration. We tend to think that the cross-platform orchestration is where the really interesting stuff is going to happen. So the fact that these are closed ecosystems is a significant limitation you'll want to fully understand. Then the next 3 in the middle are really about building and managing frameworks. So you have composition frameworks, which again are really more developer tools for building your own agents. Again, the interesting thing about these is that some of these agents can be true orchestration agents, so you can orchestrate across platforms. These require a developer, so you need developers to work with you to deliver these in a MarTech context. Configurable builders are similar to composition frameworks, except that it's more of a browser-based, low-code, potentially no-code approach. Very familiar kind of bifurcation there between something on the left, it's more code-heavy in the composition frameworks, and then these low-code builders, which have all the pros and cons that you could think of around low-code builders, but something that can allow you to potentially build some simple agentic kind of applications. Then you have some older school vendors here. It's funny to call them older school. Some of these are only 5 or 10 years old, but you know, the RPA vendors that are now talking about being able to supply a kind of an agentic layer. So UiPath, Workato, Pega, Core. Some of these are vendors you may recognize who have been around for a while. Of course, the key thing here is while these may focus on orchestration, you need to make sure that you're getting full agentic capabilities out of that, and that they're not just kind of putting some old process automation wine in a new bottle. Then on the far right is more kind of things that are around agent ops and toolkits that are important if you're going to be running a whole layer of freestanding or integrated agents within your environment. How do you manage the operations and integration among those? Those are maybe some helper applications that you see on the far right. So as usual in the MarTech marketplace, you have an embarrassment of riches or an embarrassment of choices here, and some are more promising than others. A lot of development going on here, a lot of excitement, quite frankly, a lot of hype going on here, but it doesn't take much of an imagination to begin to understand how this could leverage some other AI intelligence in your stack, and how, as we are approaching uncertain macroeconomic times, the potential for agents to really help you scale in a more cost-effective, efficient way. So some of the excitement around agents certainly is well taken. Again, we want to kind of break it down into categories and help you take a structured, business-focused approach to it rather than just kind of getting excited about the hype. All right. So lots of interesting takeaways here. If you're a subscriber, you can get a hold of the full 30 slide deck advisory paper that we put out that had a lot of interesting conclusions. For our purposes here today, with only 5 minutes left, I'm going to just drill down on a specific recommendation and then describe some ways that you can get some assistance here. So, the first thing that we would argue, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, I'm going to go into some more detail here around not over-indexing on Gen AI. So I'm not saying that Gen AI is overhyped or there's not real value there. There is value in Gen AI and a lot of opportunity there. It's just that even today, when organizations talk about AI, sometimes they're really referring just to Gen AI. And while it adds value in the content supply chain efficiency and personalization elements, so there's real value there. But what's interesting is that when we went out and surveyed our MarTech Council, so these are enterprise leaders at some of the largest enterprises in the world, and we went out, they belong to our Real Story Group Council, and we've surveyed them on a couple occasions in North America and in Europe about where they were with respect to adoption, and then in the types of AI initiatives, and then the maturity of those initiatives. And what was interesting is that the more mature use cases are more around insights and decisioning. That there's a lot of experimentation going on with Gen AI, and that's great, but fewer Gen AI pilots going into production now. Partly that's because of cost, but I think partly it's because of some of the challenges of scaling it for other reasons, and about sort of matching it up to specific business use cases. So so I'm not suggesting that you discontinue your Gen AI initiatives, but rather make sure that you understand that Gen AI sometimes is downstream from insights and AI decisioning, and that you sort of apportion your effort and your strategies accordingly. Happy to report that Real Story Group can help you here. We have a number of different strategy accelerators that we can offer to you. First of all, use case discovery and road mapping, which kind of helps you understand which use cases might be the most valuable to pursue, potentially in relation to what some other organizations your size are doing, where that all fits within the MarTech stack. My colleagues can also help you with an AI information readiness and architecture review. In other words, what are you really ready? What do you need to do to be truly successful? And then specifically when you do get to generative AI, kind of a Gen AI readiness and help you with the really critical content ops that are required to leverage generative AI. So if you're thinking about those three, feel free to reach out. And as always, we can help you with the right vendor identification. Those of you who've been following us for the past decade know that we have a design thinking approach to technology selection that uses the classic steps in design thinking: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. We've converted this into an agile-ish selection process. It works for every MarTech technology, including AI for MarTech. And we can guide you through a rapid test-based process. So you leverage our experience and our templates to not only make a better decision, but make a better decision faster and be much more ready to go from technology selection to MVP and rollout. So if you're interested in any of those, feel free to reach out to us at these coordinates. Explore at Real Story Group, ping us there. If you're interested in a free half-hour consultation with an AI principal here about your particular situation, that's only for, of course, Real Story Group only works with enterprises. So if you are an enterprise MarTech leader, feel free to ping us there and we can set up an initial 30-minute consultation to just get a sense for what's going on in your world. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn to learn about future webinars. And the next one in 2 weeks is going to be about our famous MarTech subway map, which we just updated what's new in version 17. And then as always, you can download sample vendor evaluation research, including sample evaluation from our AI stream. That's an 8-page detailed evaluation, comparative evaluation of an AI vendor to kind of help you understand, hey, this is how we evaluate vendors and maybe how you look at it. So with that, let's get to some questions. So from Ken, we're seeing a lot of activity around the movement of brands and agencies taking SEO teams and methods to LLMO GEO plays. Are half a dozen companies now that benchmark or index brand equity via this kind of scoring. It's creating new services with in-house or agencies to make content accessible to LMNOs to scrape. I see this as another layer of the ecosystem address. Is RSG seeing this in the market as well? Yes, we are. I think folks are still being a little bit careful about this. And again, the key thing is that this is a content play at some level as well. And so you really have to understand where does this fit in your broader marketing strategy, but then also, are you prepared from a content chops perspective to really leverage this? So Oliver's saying he was surprised by the high adoption rate. So that was going back to the levels of adoption. Which vendors are most popular for Insights AI and Decisioning AI? It's impossible to know which vendors are most popular. And part of the problem, Oliver, is that still a lot of organizations are lighting up specific capabilities that are coming from any vendor. So, to the extent that every vendor has put in their own, some cases plain vanilla, sometimes they OEM, sometimes they do this through a partnership of some kind. So there's a lot of different technologies that are hiding within platforms. I think that there's also a lot of homegrown stuff out there. We believe, Oliver, that this is going to sort itself out over the next 3 or 4 years, and certain vendors will come to the fore as independent layers in the stack. But with respect to today's market share, kind of tough to know. So Leor is asking, what are the implications of AI on the DAM market? So I think it's going to call the question on what my colleague Jared has described as DAM 4.0, where your digital asset management platforms becomes an omni-channel content platform. and that's a real a qualitative leap. We think that omnichannel content platforms are likely to be, for large enterprise anyways, kind of the basis for a lot of the Gen AI work that they're going to be doing and some of the insights AI work that they're going to be doing. So I think it's going to accelerate some trends that were already in out there in the world. Joe, how much is the foundational AI approach ideal versus practical at this point in time? Yeah, that's always a great question. I think, so I'll be candid and say it's ideal. Again, this is about sort of road mapping, and all roadmaps and all to-be MarTech stacks are aspirational. So I'm not telling you not to light up some of the AI capabilities that might come from, you know, any number of the 36 tools that are in your stack, Joe. But I will say that you want to be careful about all of them, that they still meet those 6, remember those 6 blue boxes on the right, that those capabilities meet your guardrails, and to really push your vendors to be able to adopt third-party foundational services from your enterprise, which are likely to be cheaper, more robust, and probably better backed. So it is a process and a transition, I think, that we're all undergoing, but that's a great question. Okay. So with that, we've run a little bit late, but always great to see you all at these webinars. You can go to our website and sign up for our next one in 2 weeks' time on the subway map. In the meantime, feel free to reach out at explore@realstorygroup.com if there's any questions that you want answered about AI in your enterprise stack. So for Scott Dill, this is Tony Byrne signing out for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.